I'm just an average American, but I'm an American, and some of the things I see in this country of ours make my blood boil.
I've heard this kind of talk before, but I never expected to hear it in America.
This fellow seems to know what he's talking about.
Populism has been popular for a very long time. Julius Caesar, Caesar Augustus and Tiberius Gracchus all tried to mobilize the Roman masses and used referenda to bypass the Roman Senate. There was even an unofficial faction in the Senate known as the Populists, which was known for its populist agenda.
Populism as an ideology divides society into two groups, so the people and the ruling elite. And it argues that politics has to be the expression of the general will of the people.
People are frightened now. Even in rich countries like Austria, we saw all the polls that people are frightened, are afraid for their future. They see that the new generation is going to be worse off than the previous generation, which happens for the first time.
Today, populism has many loose definitions, but at its root, populism is a belief in the power of regular people and their right to control over their government, rather than a small group of political insiders or a wealthy elite. Ironically, what often starts as a groundswell of public anger at a perceived elite merely becomes a vehicle for exploitation of the people by another populist elite. The little guy is usually buying a new wolf in sheep's clothing.
You see, we human beings are not born with prejudices. Always they are made for us, made by someone who wants something. Remember that when you hear this kind of talk. Somebody is going to get something out of it, and it isn't going to be you.
Populism on the left and on the right is a result of too much centralization. And for instance, Britain, I think, would still be in the European Union had we allowed the British to have more control, for instance, over their own immigration.
That's why we got Trump, that's why we got Brexit. This is actually the result of people feeling unsatisfied, feeling far away from political elites and unhappy.
Europe is caught in a global populist storm. The winds of change have been blowing hard across the continent. The stunning Brexit result shocked moderates and emboldened populist movements in France, the Netherlands, Austria and Germany. But the narrowness of the winning Brexit result and the losing Austrian presidential result tell us that society is not neatly divided into a small group of elites versus a large group of populists. It isn't a simple case of them and us, at least not in the true populist sense. Something else is at play.
Populism, by the way, is not only a thing of the very right or the very left. I find it also very often amongst those who are leading Europe, when they make promises which they can't fulfill. Already in the year 2000, the European leaders have said that the European Union will be the most prosperous and most competitive union or region in the world by the year 2010. Look what has happened. The opposite has happened. And again, they are making unrealistic promises. So these unrealistic promises by the leaders like Juncker or Schulz, these unrealistic promises for me is also a kind of populism.
In The Ugly Truth about the rise of Trump and Brexit, David Aronovich, writing for The Times, argues that the movements for change in Britain and the US are not being driven by the left-behind poor, but by nationalism. Aronovich points to the work of Eric Kaufman, professor of politics at Birkbeck University of London, who compared data from the US presidential primaries and the British referendum campaign. At its root, today's populism is about two very different views of how we should live. It's not about money or lack of it, it's about a view of freedom. Kaufman's data indicates an important voter predictor of choice, showing that authoritarianism versus liberalism is a much better way of understanding today's populism than the elite versus the people or the left behind versus the comfortable.
This is what I call the Titanic phenomenon. You know, rich people are dancing on the board of Titanic, and and the boat is going towards the iceberg. Nobody is paying attention.
My view is that this rising populism, especially on the right, will result in a rethinking also amongst the countries. I think more and more countries will discover that they have to rediscover the virtues of an own nation.
First of all, the decisions we are adopting in Brussels are European. So already that sometimes is a problem, how to make European decision close to people that live in a national environment. They just feel what is good for their security, jobs, daily life.
For a very long time, member states were starting to get integrated into the European Union. Now it's time to integrate the European Union into the member states. So it is also up to the institutions to be more proactive in selling and promoting this common European idea.
In his book, The Political Brain, The Role of Emotion in Deciding the Fate of the Nation, Professor Drew Westen argues that in politics, when reason and emotion collide, emotion invariably wins. Perhaps his most poignant example is the Gore-Bush campaign. Gore, says Westen, had the most rational, reasoned arguments, largely based on good research, on facts. Bush had folksy charm and a readiness to provoke the electorate with fear. Westen's research shows how the human brain responds to reason and emotion in political messaging. Basically, emotional messaging produces a strong and immediate brain response. Rational arguments, says Westen, produce a response in a different part of the brain.
If we really believe in something positive, in Austria we showed that it's working. You can win elections with a pro-European stance. This is a big surprise for many people. I did it as well with my party during the election campaign in 2014, where the slogan was, "We love Europe." This was quite provocative. It was very positive. We made 80% from zero.
When it comes to the strategy, sometimes I feel it would maybe be useful to have a commissioner maybe for a communication, because people feel that Brussels is still far away from them. They feel they are not part of the process. They don't understand politics. For example, CETA was a good example. No transparency, no understanding what is going on behind the closed door. This clearly indicates that it would be very necessary that institutions, especially Commission, would communicate policies. If you don't communicate them, even the best idea will fail if citizens don't understand it.
Communication goes together with politics. The politics have to be changed, and then the communication will change as well.
Fear-invoking messages are much harder for the brain to overlook or erase, whereas hope floats. An emotionally positive message may resonate, but it is not embedded as deeply in the brain. So when we decide who to vote for, the risk is that a strongly negative emotional message will override a weaker signal from the reasoning part of the brain. The challenge for moderates, for centrist politicians, is to defuse the negative emotional messages before they embed in the voters' brains. And they must realize that to clean the poison of baseless lies from the collective consciousness takes time and constant counter-messaging.
What we have to do is to be in the shoes of the voters of the rural areas and the people they are influenced by the extreme right. And we have to do a very systematic job too, both on terms of the media and communication, but also in terms of politics, to persuade them that this is not the right thing to do.
If we liberals, or we who believe in the open society as being the right way, and we who believe that democracy, the rule of law, human rights are actually the base for everything, if we are not loud and outspoken, and if we don't offer also provocative new ideas, well, then somebody else is setting the agenda.
The average citizen has become disillusioned, feels disempowered, and has become disengaged from traditional politics. So basically, it is up to the mainstream parties to re-engage with citizens, to make democracy work for them, to find and really explain properly credible solutions to their problems and to the crises that are going on at the moment.
How would you push back against the negative elements of populism today?
I honestly think that we have to give people, voters, the electorate, an honest choice, because now people feel like they go and have the possibility to vote, but they do not have a choice. So it's more about really to have the courage also to offer bigger ideas.
There is another riskier way out of populism. Let populists be populists. As a toppled British politician once said, when populists have to govern, they aren't very popular, and that's because they simply can't deliver on their exaggerated promises. They may themselves be seen as a self-serving elite, as a plutocracy. One can only suppose that there were shouts of "Hail Caesar" on the same day Caesar was stabbed in the back. If we compel others to drink the poison of populism, we will ourselves be compelled to drink from the same cup.